Montana Territory, 1886. Winter came early to the rolling plains and jagged mountains of Silverleaf County, bringing with it a bitter cold that bit through leather and wool alike. Asher Norwood stood at the window of the ranch house, watching snowflakes dance in the gathering dusk. At 25, he had already weathered 7 brutal Montana winters as foreman of the Rockingham Ranch, each one reinforcing what he knew to be true. The frontier was a place for survival, not sentiment. The flickering lamp cast shadows across his handsome face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the weariness in his hazel eyes. Though young, the responsibility of running the ranch since old man McAllister's passing had etched fine lines around his eyes and mouth. He absently ran a hand through his dark brown hair, longer than he usually kept it since winter had set in early. "Mails here," came the voice of Sam Bailey, the oldest hand on the ranch, interrupting Asher's thoughts. "Got a letter from back east, fancy handwriting." Asher broke the seal on the envelope, scanning the elegant script. "McAllister's niece is coming," he said, disbelief coloring his words. "Says she's arriving next week to help settle her uncle's affairs." Sam snorted, "Eastern girl, coming to Montana in December. She'll be on the first train back once she feels that north wind." Asher nodded in agreement. He had no patience for soft city folk who thought the West was some romantic adventure. The frontier wasn't a place for delicate women with their fancy dresses and impractical notions. His mother had learned that lesson the hard way, worked herself to death trying to make a home in unforgiving territory while his father drank away their savings. No, love had no place in the West. It was merely a distraction from the daily fight for survival. "She says she's coming to work," Asher said, folding the letter. "Claims she has experience with accounts and business matters." "A woman handling business." Sam shook his head. "Times sure are changing." "Not here they aren't," Asher replied firmly. "She can stay until spring thaw, help organize McAllister's papers, then head back east where she belongs. I don't need some city girl interfering with how I run things." The week passed quickly as Asher and the ranch hands prepared for their unwelcome visitor. They cleared out the small cabin near the main house, usually reserved for the ranch's bookkeeper, though that position had been vacant since McAllister died. Asher had been handling the accounts himself, not perfectly, but well enough to keep the ranch afloat. On a bitterly cold Thursday afternoon, Asher drove the wagon into town to meet the stage. Snow had been falling steadily since morning, and he was certain the stage would be delayed if it arrived at all. To his surprise, it pulled into Silverleaf only 20 minutes behind schedule, its horses steaming in the cold air. The stagecoach door swung open, and Asher steeled himself for the complaints he was sure would come from an Eastern lady unprepared for Montana's harsh welcome. Instead, a young woman stepped down unassisted, dressed sensibly in a heavy wool traveling coat, sturdy boots visible beneath her dark blue skirt. She glanced around with clear blue eyes, seeming to take the measure of the frontier town in a single sweep. "Mr. Norwood," she called, spotting him by the wagon. Asher approached, tipping his hat automatically. "Miss McAllister." "Miss Porter," she corrected, "Clara Porter. My mother was Mr. McAllister's sister. Thank you for meeting me." Her voice carried no trace of complaint about the weather or the rough accommodations, which took Asher by surprise. Up close he could see she was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 22 or 23, with honey blonde hair neatly pinned beneath a practical bonnet. Her face, though reddened by the cold, was undeniably beautiful, with high cheekbones, a delicate nose, and those striking blue eyes that reminded him of summer skies, a distant memory in the grip of winter. "We should get moving," he said curtly, helping the driver unload her trunk. "Storm's picking up, and it's a fair ride to the ranch." Of course, she moved to assist with her luggage, but Asher waved her away. "I've got it. You'd best get in the wagon and under the blankets." The journey back to the ranch was mostly silent. Asher occasionally glanced at his passenger, expecting to find her huddled miserably under the blankets. Instead, Clara sat straight back despite the cold, taking in the snowy landscape with evident interest. "It's beautiful," she remarked as they crested a hill that revealed the valley below, white and pristine in the fading light. Uncle James wrote about these views, but his descriptions hardly did justice to the reality. Asher grunted in response. "Beauty doesn't keep you warm or fed. Winter here kills the unprepared." "I imagine it does," she replied evenly. "Which is why preparation matters. Uncle's letters explained quite thoroughly what to expect. I brought appropriate clothing and no illusions about frontier life." Her response caught him off guard. Most Eastern visitors arrived with trunks full of impractical clothing and heads full of dime novel nonsense about the Wild West. Yet this woman claimed to have come prepared, and from what he could see, she had. "Why exactly are you here, Miss Porter?" he asked bluntly. "McAllister left everything in proper order. There's no need for you to suffer through a Montana winter just to look at some papers." Clara turned to face him directly. "Uncle James left me a 10% share in the ranch, Mr. Norwood. I intend to understand my investment. Additionally, my uncle's letters mention the ranch has been without proper accounting for months. I'm qualified to rectify that situation." Asher's hands tightened on the reins. McAllister had never mentioned leaving part of the ranch to his niece. "You came all this way to check ledgers, in December." "I came to work, Mr. Norwood," she stated firmly, "and December is when the stage was available. Now, shall we discuss the ranch's current financial standing, or would you prefer to continue questioning my motives for the remainder of our journey?" By the time they reached the ranch, darkness had fallen completely, and the snowfall had intensified. Asher showed Clara to the bookkeeper's cabin, a small but solid structure with a pot-bellied stove already radiating heat thanks to Sam's foresight. The cabin contained a narrow bed, a desk with a chair, a small table with 2 chairs, and a washstand. "Simple but clean and warm. It's not what you're accustomed to," Asher said, setting down her trunk. "It's exactly what I expected," Clara replied. "Thank you for the accommodation. I'll begin reviewing the accounts tomorrow, if you'll show me to the office." Asher frowned. "You've just traveled for days. Surely you need rest." "I've rested on trains and stages for nearly a week, Mr. Norwood. What I need is to be useful." Her voice softened slightly. "This was my uncle's life's work. I want to understand it properly." Looking at her determined expression, Asher felt a reluctant flicker of respect. "First meals at sunup," he said. "I'll show you to the office afterward." That night, lying in his bed in the main house, Asher found himself thinking about Clara Porter. She wasn't what he'd expected, not by a long shot. Most women who came west either broke quickly under the harsh conditions or clung desperately to Eastern ways, trying to force civilization onto the frontier. Clara seemed different somehow. Still, he reminded himself, she'd only just arrived. The real test would come with time and the increasing hardships of a Montana winter. Over the next 2 weeks, Asher watched Clara with growing confusion. She rose before dawn each day, joined the men for breakfast without complaint about the simple fare, and worked diligently through the ranch's accounts until well after dark. She dressed practically in sensible wool dresses with high collars and long sleeves, her blonde hair always neatly pinned back. She asked intelligent questions about the ranch operations and never shied away from the harsh realities of frontier life. "Your cattle inventory doesn't match the sales records," she informed him one evening, looking up from the ledgers spread across the office desk. "You're missing 20 head that should have been sold last spring." Asher leaned over to examine the figures, acutely aware of her scent, something clean and faintly floral, out of place in the masculine environment of the ranch. "Those went to settle a debt with the Henderson place," he explained. "I must have forgotten to note it." "Details matter in business, Mr. Norwood," she said, not unkindly. "I've created a new system that should make record-keeping simpler." She showed him the new ledgers she'd organized, each transaction categorized and dated with meticulous precision. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, genuinely impressed despite himself. "My father is an accountant in Boston," she explained. "He taught me his methods from the time I was old enough to hold a pencil. I worked in his office for 5 years before coming here." And he allowed that, a woman handling financial matters. Clara's blue eyes flashed. "My father values competence over convention, Mr. Norwood. A trait I've found uncommon but invaluable." As December progressed, the ranch prepared for Christmas. It wasn't a grand celebration. Frontier Christmas rarely was, but the hands appreciated the small traditions. Extra rations of whiskey, special foods saved for the occasion, and a few simple decorations in the main house. Asher had never put much stock in holidays, but McAllister had insisted on maintaining some semblance of civilization, even in the wilderness. On the evening of December 23rd, Asher called Clara to the main house to discuss the ranch accounts. Sam had built up the fire in the sitting room, and the usually austere space felt almost welcoming in the firelight. When a knock came at the door, Asher opened it, then stopped dead in his tracks. Clara Porter stood on the porch, but not the Clara he had come to know over the past weeks. This Clara wore a dress of deep emerald green velvet that caught the lamplight and seemed to glow. The dress had a modest neckline trimmed with delicate white lace that highlighted her slender neck and fair complexion. Her honey blonde hair was arranged in soft curls that framed her face instead of being severely pinned back as usual. In the soft light with snowflakes melting on her eyelashes, she looked like something from another world entirely. "Miss Porter," he managed, suddenly aware he was staring. "Mr. Norwood," she replied with a small smile. "I hope I'm not late. It took longer than expected to press this dress." "No, you're right on time." He stepped back, allowing her to enter. "That's quite a dress for a business meeting." Clara's cheeks colored slightly. "It's Christmas, Mr. Norwood, even on the frontier. Surely that warrants a moment of festivity." She unwrapped her shawl, revealing more of the beautiful dress. "This was my Christmas dress in Boston last year. I brought it thinking there might be some small celebration, even here." Something shifted in Asher's chest, a feeling he couldn't name and didn't want to examine. This woman who worked with the dedication of any man, who rode out with him to check fence lines without complaint, who understood figures and cattle prices better than most ranchers, was suddenly, undeniably feminine in a way that caught him completely off guard. We do have a small gathering planned for tomorrow evening," he said, suddenly feeling awkward in his rough work clothes. "Nothing fancy, just dinner with the hands in the main house, maybe some music if Williams brings his fiddle." "That sounds lovely," Clara said, her eyes bright with genuine pleasure. "Now, shall we discuss those cattle futures you mentioned in your note?" They worked for over an hour, but Asher found it increasingly difficult to concentrate on cattle prices with Clara sitting across from him, the firelight playing on her golden hair. He had grown accustomed to her presence on the ranch, even come to respect her work ethic and intelligence, but tonight he was seeing her differently, not as McAllister's businesslike niece, but as a beautiful young woman who had traveled across the country alone, who faced frontier hardships without complaint, who somehow managed to maintain grace even in the roughest circumstances. "Mr. Norwood," Clara's voice broke through his thoughts, "you seem distracted. Perhaps we should continue this tomorrow." "No, I apologize," he said quickly. "It's just, I've never seen you dressed like this before." Clara smoothed a hand over the velvet skirt. "Does it make you uncomfortable?" I thought, with Christmas approaching. "Not uncomfortable," he corrected, "just surprised." "You've been so focused on work since you arrived, I almost forgot." He trailed off, not sure how to finish the thought without sounding improper. "That I'm a woman," she supplied with a raised eyebrow. "That you came from somewhere else," he amended. "Somewhere with Christmas balls and proper society. You've adapted so well to ranch life, it's easy to forget you don't belong here." The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. A flash of hurt crossed Clara's features before she composed herself. "I see," she said quietly. "Well, I didn't mean to give a false impression. I came here to work, as I told you from the beginning. The dress is merely a reminder of home." She gathered her papers efficiently. "I believe we've covered everything essential for tonight." Before he could respond, there was a commotion outside, shouting men and the sound of horses arriving at a gallop. Asher rose immediately, moving to the window. "It's Williams and Cooper," he said, recognizing two of his hands. "Something's wrong." He hurried outside, Clara following close behind despite the snow and her fine dress. Williams dismounted quickly, his face grave in the lantern light. "Rustlers hit the north pasture," he reported breathlessly. "Took at least 30 head, maybe more. Cooper's hurt, took a bullet in the shoulder when he tried to stop them." Cooper was slumped in his saddle, a dark stain spreading across his coat. Asher and Sam helped him down while Clara moved forward without hesitation. "Bring him inside," she commanded. "I need hot water, clean cloth, and your medical supplies." "Miss Porter, this isn't," Asher began. "I volunteered at a hospital in Boston," she cut him off. "Now, unless you have a doctor hidden somewhere on this ranch, I suggest you let me help." For the next hour, Clara worked efficiently to clean and bandage Cooper's wound, her beautiful green dress soon stained with blood. She gave orders with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed, and to Asher's surprise, even the most hardened ranch hands followed her instructions without question. "The bullet went through clean," she finally announced, straightening up from Cooper's side. "He's fortunate. Keep the wound clean, make sure he rests, and watch for fever." Thank you, ma'am, Cooper said weakly from the sofa where they'd laid him. Clara smiled gently. You're welcome, Mr. Cooper, now rest. She stepped outside onto the porch, where Asher had gone to discuss the rustlers with Williams and the other men. They fell silent as she appeared, the green velvet of her dress now splashed with blood and her hair falling from its careful arrangement. How is he? Asher asked. He'll recover if infection doesn't set in, she replied. I've done what I can. Asher nodded, then turned back to his men. Williams, you and Johnson stay here with Cooper. The rest of us ride at first light. Those rustlers can't have gotten far in this snow. I'm going with you, Clara stated firmly. Asher turned to her in disbelief. Absolutely not. This is no place for a woman, she finished for him, her blue eyes flashing. Mr. Norwood, I've proven my capabilities repeatedly since arriving here. I'm an excellent rider. I can use a rifle, and I know this ranch's cattle better than anyone except you, thanks to my work with the ledgers. I'll know exactly which animals were taken. It's dangerous, he insisted. These men are killers. All the more reason to have every capable person helping, she countered. I didn't come all this way to hide indoors when I'm needed. The other ranch hands watched the exchange with interest, and Asher realized with growing frustration that they seemed impressed by Clara's determination rather than shocked by her impropriety. We'll discuss this in private, he said tightly, gesturing for her to follow him back inside. In the hallway, away from the others, he turned to face her. This isn't Boston, Miss Porter. The frontier has different rules. Men who steal cattle don't hesitate to harm anyone who gets in their way. I'm well aware of the dangers, she replied evenly. Uncle James didn't send sanitized accounts of ranch life in his letters. I came prepared for the reality, not some romantic notion of the West. Then you should understand why I can't allow you to put yourself at risk. Clara's eyes narrowed. Allow me, Mr. Norwood, I own 10% of this ranch. Those are my cattle, too. Ownership doesn't prepare you for tracking armed men through the wilderness in winter. Neither does being a man necessarily, she shot back. Yet you'll take young Thomas, who's barely 18 and has never fired a gun at anything but targets. Asher ran a hand through his hair in frustration. That's different. Because he's male, Mr. Norwood, I thought you were a practical man who valued competence. Was I mistaken? Looking at her standing there, chin raised in defiance, blue eyes bright with determination, still wearing the blood-stained Christmas dress that somehow made her seem both vulnerable and formidable, Asher felt something inside him shift. She had come to Montana claiming she wanted to work, and at every turn she had proven herself more capable than he could have imagined. You'll need proper clothing, he said at last. And you'll stay behind me at all times. The smile that broke across her face struck him with unexpected force. Thank you, she said simply. Don't thank me yet, he warned. It'll be dangerous, cold, and uncomfortable. Nothing like your Boston Christmases. Clara glanced down at her ruined dress with a wry smile. I believe my Boston Christmases are already well behind me, Mr. Norwood. Dawn broke gray and cold as the search party prepared to depart. Clara appeared from her cabin dressed in men's clothing, a flannel shirt, wool trousers, and a heavy coat that Asher recognized as belonging to Sam's son, who had left for California the previous spring. Her hair was braided and tucked beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and she carried a Winchester rifle with the confidence of someone who knew how to use it. Sam's idea, she explained, seeing Asher's surprise at her attire. He said a dress would be a death sentence in this weather, and I agree. Sam's a smart man, Asher conceded. Can you really handle that rifle? In answer, Clara raised the Winchester, took aim at a distant fence post with a tin can perched atop it, and fired. The can flew into the air. My father believes women should be able to protect themselves, she said simply, lowering the weapon. Especially those who might one day live on a frontier. The tracking party consisted of Asher, Clara, Sam, and 3 other experienced hands. The snow made tracking the rustlers relatively easy. Their heavily laden horses had left clear trails heading northeast toward the territorial border. By midday they had covered significant ground, and Asher estimated they were closing the gap. They're slowing down, Sam observed, examining fresh tracks. Cattle can't move fast in the snow, and they're pushing too hard. Animals will start dropping soon. Good for us, Asher replied, bad for the cattle. They pressed on, stopping only briefly to rest the horses and eat cold rations. Clara kept pace without complaint, her face reddened by the cold but her eyes alert and determined. By late afternoon, smoke was visible in the distance. A camp. We'll approach after dark, Asher decided. They'll be less vigilant then, especially if they think they've lost us in the storm. They waited in a sheltered grove of pines, speaking little as darkness fell. Clara sat close to Asher, their shoulders nearly touching as they huddled for warmth. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. Clara considered the question seriously. "Yes," she finally admitted. "But fear doesn't mean I shouldn't be here." She glanced at him. "Are you afraid, Mr. Norwood?" "Asher," he corrected. "If we're facing rustlers together, you might as well use my given name." "Asher," she repeated, and something about the way she said it made his heart beat faster. "Are you afraid?" "Only of failure," he answered truthfully. "These men have already hurt one of mine. I can't let them get away with that or with the cattle. The ranch can't afford the loss." "The ranch or you?" she asked perceptively. Asher looked away. "McAllister trusted me to run this place. Every loss feels like I'm failing him." "My uncle chose you for a reason," Clara said gently. "His letters were full of praise for your work ethic and integrity. He wouldn't want you risking your life over a few cattle." "It's not just about the cattle," Asher admitted. "If rustlers succeed here, they'll be back, and they'll hit other ranches too. Out here, we have to stand together against those who would take what isn't theirs. It's the only law that matters." Clara nodded in understanding. "Then we'll stand together tonight." When full darkness fell, they approached the rustlers' camp carefully. 6 men sat around a campfire, passing a bottle and laughing, clearly celebrating their successful theft. The stolen cattle were penned in a makeshift corral nearby, looking miserable in the cold. "Too confident," Sam whispered. "They should have posted a guard." Asher nodded. "We'll surround them." "Clara, you stay with me." They separated, each taking position around the camp. Asher and Clara crept closer, using the darkness for cover. When everyone was in position, Asher gave the signal, a low owl call, and stepped into the firelight, rifle raised. "Hands up, gentlemen," he called firmly. "You're surrounded." The rustlers reacted with confusion, some reaching for weapons before realizing they were indeed outgunned, with rocking men emerging from the darkness on all sides. "We're taking back our cattle," Asher continued, "and you're going to face justice in Silverleaf." One man, clearly the leader, slowly raised his hands. "You're outnumbered, Cowboy. 6 of us, only 5 of you." "I can count." "6 of us," Clara corrected, stepping forward with her Winchester aimed steadily. "And we're not drunk." The leader's eyes narrowed as he took in Clara's appearance. "Well now, what's this? You boys so desperate you're bringing women to do your fighting." "I own part of the cattle you stole," Clara replied coolly. "That makes this my fight." The moment stretched taut as a bowstring, then suddenly the leader dove for his gun. Shots exploded in the clearing. Asher fired, hitting the leader in the arm. 2 other rustlers managed to draw their weapons. One fired at Clara, the bullet whizzing past her ear. Without hesitation, she squeezed the trigger of her Winchester, hitting the man in the shoulder and sending him sprawling. The firefight was brief but intense. When it ended, 2 rustlers were wounded, and the rest had surrendered. As Sam and the others secured the prisoners, Asher turned to Clara, his heart pounding with fear for her safety. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, grasping her shoulders and looking her over for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, though her hands trembled slightly as she lowered her rifle. "I never actually shot a person before." "You did what you had to do," Asher said quietly. "You saved lives tonight, maybe even mine." Clara nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "I came to work," she said with a faint smile, "though I admit this wasn't the type of work I anticipated." The journey back to the ranch was slow and cold, with the rustlers bound and the recovered cattle trudging through deepening snow. They arrived late on Christmas Eve, exhausted but triumphant. The wounded rustlers were treated, then all 6 men were locked in the storage cellar until they could be taken to the territorial marshal after Christmas. Clara disappeared to her cabin immediately upon their return, while Asher dealt with the prisoners and ensured the recovered cattle were properly cared for. By the time he finished, it was well past midnight, officially Christmas morning. Exhausted but unable to sleep, he found himself walking toward Clara's cabin, a small package in his hand. He hesitated before knocking, wondering if she would be asleep. A light still burned inside, however, so he rapped gently on the door. Clara opened it moments later, dressed in a simple blue dress, her damp hair hanging loose around her shoulders. She had clearly just bathed, and the fresh scent of soap surrounded her. "Asher," she said in surprise, "is everything all right? Are the prisoners secure?" "Everything's fine," he assured her. "I just wanted to check on you. And to give you this." He held out the small package, wrapped in plain brown paper. "Merry Christmas." Clara's eyes widened. "Oh, I wasn't expecting. Please come in." The cabin was warm and neat, with a small fire burning in the stove. Clara gestured him to one of the two chairs at the table, then sat across from him, carefully unwrapping the package. Inside was a small wooden box, beautifully carved with a pattern of pine trees and mountains. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the intricate carving. "I made it," Asher admitted. "Been working on it evenings, not much else to do in winter. I thought you might use it for letters or keepsakes." "You made this yourself?" Clara looked at him with new appreciation. "It's exquisite work, Asher, thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I have something for you as well, though it wasn't intended as a Christmas gift." She went to her trunk and returned with a leather-bound ledger. "I've organized all the ranch accounts, including projections for spring sales and breeding programs. There's also a system I've developed that should make daily record-keeping simpler." She handed it to him. "Consider it my contribution to the ranch's future." Asher opened the ledger, amazed at the meticulous work and clear organization, hours upon hours of effort represented in the neat columns and precise figures. "This is extraordinary, Clara, thank you." "I came to work," she reminded him with a small smile. "Yes, you did," he agreed, meeting her eyes, "but you've done far more than work. You've changed how I see things." Clara's cheeks flushed slightly. "What do you mean?" Asher struggled to find the right words. "I've always believed the frontier was no place for connections. That out here you survive by staying focused, not getting attached. My parents' marriage taught me that love is a liability in a place where survival is never guaranteed." "And now," Clara asked softly, "now I've met someone who came west not for adventure or escape, but to work. Someone who understands ledgers and cattle prices, who can bandage wounds and shoot straight, who wears men's clothing to track rustlers but also owns a green velvet Christmas dress." He reached across the table, hesitantly taking her hand. "Someone who makes me question everything I thought I knew about surviving out here." Clara's fingers tightened around his. "The frontier doesn't have to mean isolation, Asher. People need connections to survive, perhaps here more than anywhere." "I'm beginning to see that," he admitted. "When I saw you in that Christmas dress, something changed, and then watching you ride out with us face down those rustlers. Clara, you're unlike anyone I've ever met." "I could say the same about you," she replied. "A rancher who carves wooden boxes and worries about failing a man who clearly trusted him completely." Her blue eyes held his steadily. "A man worth knowing better." Outside, snow began falling again, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, a Christmas gift from the Montana skies. Inside the small cabin, two people who had expected nothing from the holiday found something neither had been looking for. Possibility. Christmas Day at the Rocking M Ranch was unlike any in memory. The traditional dinner in the main house was enhanced by Clara's presence and her unexpected talent for holiday cooking. She had somehow managed to bake pies and prepare special dishes despite the recent excitement, transforming the usual hearty but plain ranch fare into something festive. "Where did you find cranberries?" Asher asked in amazement as she brought out a sauce to accompany the venison. "I brought them with me from Denver," she explained, "along with other things I thought might be needed for Christmas." They traveled surprisingly well packed in sugar. The ranch hands were delighted by the treat, and even Cooper, still recovering from his wound, was helped to the table to join the celebration. After dinner, Williams produced his fiddle as promised, and music filled the main house for the first time since McAllister's passing. "Dance with me," Asher asked Clara quietly as Williams began a waltz. She smiled up at him. "I thought you didn't approve of frivolity on the frontier." "I'm reconsidering my position on many things," he replied, leading her into the open space that had been cleared in the center of the room. Clara moved gracefully in his arms, her blue dress, not the blood-stained green velvet, but still more formal than her usual attire, swirling around her ankles as they turned. The ranch hands watched with approving smiles, clearly having accepted Clara as one of their own after the rustler incident. "They respect you," Asher murmured as they danced. "That's rare out here, especially for someone from the East." "Respect is earned," Clara replied. "I never expected it to be given freely." "Is that why you came, to prove yourself?" Clara considered the question. "Partly," she admitted. Uncle James wrote often about the ranch, about Montana. His letters made it sound challenging but rewarding. "After my father died last spring, there was little keeping me in Boston. When Uncle James passed and left me a share of the ranch, it seemed like an opportunity, a chance to build something meaningful." "I'm sorry about your father," Asher said gently. "You never mentioned he had passed." "It didn't seem relevant to the ranch business," Clara replied, though her eyes revealed the pain she still carried. "He taught me everything I know about accounts and business." "He would have approved of me coming here, I think." "A man who taught his daughter to shoot and keep books would definitely approve of you facing down rustlers to protect your investment," Asher agreed with a small smile. As January's bitter cold gripped the ranch, Asher and Clara fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent on ranch business, Clara continuing to organize the accounts, while Asher handled the physical work of maintaining the property through the harsh winter. Afternoons often found them riding out together to check on cattle or repair fences damaged by snow and wind. Evenings were spent in conversation by the fire, discovering the many ways in which their different backgrounds had somehow prepared them to understand each other. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" Clara asked one evening as they sat in the main house, a chessboard between them. Asher moved his knight thoughtfully. "No, when I was very young, before my mother died, I wanted to be a carpenter. I loved working with wood, creating things that would last." He gestured to the mantelpiece, which held several small carved animals he had made. "McAllister encouraged it as a winter pastime, but there's not much call for fine woodworking on the frontier." "Perhaps there could be," Clara suggested, countering his move with her bishop. "As more people settle here, they'll want beautiful things for their homes, practical items made with care and artistry." "Perhaps," he agreed, studying her rather than the chessboard. "What about you? Did you always want to be an accountant?" Clara laughed, the sound warming the room more effectively than the crackling fire. "Hardly. When I was a girl, I wanted to be an explorer. I read every book about distant lands I could find and dreamed of discovering new places." Her expression softened with memory. "Father encouraged my curiosity, but also made sure I had practical skills." "Dreams need funding," he would say. "Wise man," Asher commented, "though it seems you've managed to combine both, exploring the West while applying your practical skills." "I suppose I have," she agreed, her blue eyes meeting his across the board. "Though Montana has offered adventures I never anticipated." In February, a week of relatively mild weather allowed for more extensive work around the ranch. Asher and Clara rode to the northern pasture to check on a pregnant heifer that had been struggling. The sky was clear, the snow-covered landscape glittering in the winter sunshine. "She looks better," Clara observed as they approached the young cow. "The extra feed is helping." "You have a good eye," Asher noted. "Most people wouldn't notice the difference in her condition." Clara dismounted, approaching the heifer carefully. "I've been studying the animal husbandry books from your library. Fascinating reading." Asher laughed. "Most women would prefer novels." "I read those too," she replied with a smile, "but I prefer understanding the world around me. These animals are our livelihood." "Their health matters." As Clara checked the heifer, Asher watched her with growing admiration. In the months since her arrival, she had transformed from a surprising visitor to an essential part of the ranch. The hands respected her, the accounts were in better order than ever before, and decisions about the ranch's future were now made together, her business acumen balancing his practical experience. And somehow, without his noticing exactly when it happened, she had become essential to him personally as well. Her smile at breakfast made the day brighter. Her insights during their evening conversations challenged and expanded his thinking. Her presence beside him as they rode the boundaries of the ranch made the work feel like something more than mere survival. They were heading back to the ranch when the weather changed abruptly, a common occurrence in Montana winters. Dark clouds rolled in from the west and the temperature dropped rapidly. "Blizzard coming," Asher said grimly, eyeing the approaching storm. "We need to find shelter. We'll never make it back to the ranch before it hits." "The line shack," Clara suggested, referring to a small cabin built for just such emergencies. Asher nodded. "It's our best option." "This way." They pushed their horses harder, racing the storm to the shelter of the line shack, a simple one-room structure stocked with basic provisions and firewood. They reached it just as the first heavy snowflakes began to fall, quickly unsaddling the horses and getting them into the small attached linta before hurrying inside. The cabin was cold and dark, but sound. Asher quickly built a fire while Clara took stock of the provisions: jerky, beans, coffee, and other basics. "We could be here for days if this storm is as bad as it looks," Asher warned, glancing out the single window at the rapidly deteriorating conditions. "Then we're fortunate to have shelter," Clara replied practically, already putting coffee on to boil over the small stove. "The horses are secure, we have food and firewood. Others have weathered worse." As evening fell, the storm intensified, wind howling around the small cabin and snow piling against the walls. Inside, warmth gradually spread from the fire, and the small space became almost cozy. They sat side by side on the single cot, wrapped in blankets and sharing a pot of coffee. "At least we won't have to worry about propriety," Clara remarked with a small smile. "No one would expect us to brave that storm for the sake of appearances." Asher chuckled. "I think you lost the right to worry about conventional appearances when you rode out with us to confront rustlers wearing men's clothing." "True," she agreed. "Though I do still have that green velvet dress, bloodstains and all. I can't seem to part with it." "I'm glad," Asher said quietly. "That dress, seeing you in it that night changed something for me." Clara turned to look at him, her face softly illuminated by firelight. "What do you mean?" Asher hesitated, then decided truth was the only option in this isolated cabin with a blizzard raging outside. "I told myself you were just here to work. That you were McAllister's business-minded niece, nothing more. It was safer that way." "Safer?" she prompted when he paused. "Safer for me," he admitted. "Clara, I've spent years believing that emotional attachments are dangerous on the frontier. That caring too much makes you vulnerable in a place that punishes vulnerability. My mother loved my father desperately, and that love didn't save her when he drank away their money, and she worked herself to death trying to hold things together." Clara's hand found his beneath the blanket. "I'm sorry, Asher, that's a heavy lesson to learn so young. When McAllister took me in, he taught me ranching, taught me to be responsible and disciplined. The ranch thrived because he was clear-eyed and practical. I thought that was the only way to survive out here. And now," Clara asked softly, "now I've met a woman who combines practical competence with something else, a warmth, a hope I'd forgotten was possible." He turned to face her fully. "When I saw you in that Christmas dress, I couldn't pretend anymore that you were just here to work. And when you rode out with us against the rustlers, I couldn't pretend that you didn't belong here." Clara's blue eyes shimmered in the firelight. "Where do I belong, Asher?" "Here," he said simply, bringing his hand to her cheek. "On this ranch in Montana." He swallowed hard. "With me, if that's what you want." Instead of answering with words, Clara leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Asher pulled her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the howling of the wind outside seemed distant and unimportant. "I came for work," Clara whispered against his lips. "But I found so much more." The blizzard lasted 3 days, trapping them in the line shack with only each other for company. They talked for hours, sharing childhood memories, dreams for the future, fears and hopes. They planned spring planting and cattle sales, discussed expanding the ranch's operations, and imagined improvements to the main house. In the forced intimacy of the small cabin, with the world outside reduced to swirling white, they built the foundation of a shared life. When they finally emerged, the world had been transformed, snowdrifts taller than a man in places, familiar landmarks altered or hidden completely. They made their way back to the ranch slowly, where concerned hands welcomed them with relief. "Thought we might be finding you come spring thaw," Sam said gruffly, taking their horses. "Storm was the worst in years." "We were lucky," Asher replied, his hand finding Clara's. The line shack held. Sam's weathered face creased in a knowing smile as he noted their clasped hands. Appears more than the shack held firm, he commented. Word spread quickly through the small ranch community, and to Asher's surprise, the response was universally positive. The hands had come to respect Clara's work ethic, intelligence, and courage. Their only comment was that it had taken their boss long enough to recognize what was right in front of him. As March brought the first hints of spring, Asher found Clara in the office, reviewing the breeding records for the coming season. Sunlight streamed through the window, catching in her honey-blonde hair and creating a halo effect that made his breath catch. "I've been thinking," he said, closing the door behind him. Clara looked up with a smile. "A dangerous pastime, Mr. Norwood." "Indeed, Miss Porter," he replied, approaching her desk. "I've been thinking about the future, about the ranch, and about us." "And what conclusions have you reached?" she asked, setting aside her ledger. Asher dropped to one knee beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I've concluded that I love you, Clara Porter, that against all my expectations and previous beliefs, I've found someone who makes me stronger, not weaker. Someone who sees the beauty in this harsh land, who faces its challenges with courage and grace." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, a simple gold band with a small sapphire that matched her eyes. "Would you marry me, Clara? Would you build a life here with me?" Clara's eyes filled with tears as she looked from the ring to his face. "When I came to Montana, I told myself it was just for work, to understand my inheritance, to honor my uncle's memory. I never expected," she touched his face gently, "I never expected you, Asher Norwood, a man who carves beauty from wood in the depths of winter, who leads with quiet strength, who changed his mind about what's possible on the frontier." "Is that a yes?" he asked, his heart pounding. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Clara laughed suddenly. "Do you realize it was my Christmas dress that started this? If I hadn't packed that impractical green velvet, we might still be circling each other professionally." Asher grinned as he rose, pulling her to her feet. "Then I'm grateful for your sentimentality in packing it. Perhaps you should wear it for our wedding." "Bloodstains and all," she teased. "They tell our story," he replied more seriously. "How we fought together, how you saved one of our own, how you proved you belong here not just as an accountant, but as a true partner in everything." They were married in April, as the last snow melted from the valleys and the first calves of the season were born. Clara wore a new dress of ivory satin, but incorporated a small piece of the green velvet, cleaned of bloodstains, as a ribbon around her bouquet of early spring wildflowers. The entire community gathered to celebrate, and even the territorial judge made the journey to perform the ceremony. "Never seen Norwood smile so much," Sam commented to Williams during the celebration afterward. "Man looks like he won the territorial lottery." "Better than money," Williams replied, watching the newlyweds dance. "Found someone who belongs here as much as he does. That's rare in these parts." As sunset painted the Montana sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Asher led Clara away from the festivities to the rise behind the main house. From this vantage point they could see the entire ranch, the buildings, pastures, herds, and beyond to the mountains that marked the horizon. "McAllister used to bring me here," Asher said, his arm around his new wife's waist. "He'd say, 'Remember what you're working for, boy, not just survival, but a legacy.' I didn't understand then. I thought he meant the ranch itself." Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "And now I understand he meant this," Asher gestured to the vista before them. "A place where people can put down roots, build something meaningful, create beauty even in harsh conditions. Not just existing, but truly living." Clara turned in his arms, facing him as the last light of day illuminated her features. "I came for work," she said softly, echoing the words she had spoken so often. "But I found a home. And I found the one person who could teach me that survival isn't enough," Asher replied, drawing her close. "Sometimes, even on the frontier, love is what truly helps us thrive." As darkness fell over the Montana landscape, they made their way back to the ranch house, no longer just a place of work and shelter, but the heart of a shared future neither had imagined when Clara Porter first stepped down from the stagecoach in her sensible traveling clothes, claiming she had come only for work.